So welcome to the Wales Cooperative Centre Wayfarer Demo, which will be an interactive session, and I'll be going through some slides and Alan will be showing the cards and Casey commenting. But if anybody else wants to indicate that they want to make a point, please do. So here we are on the 20th of October, trying to get back to normality, sharing offices and virtual, so it's a hybrid session. And these slides were provided by CCH, the Confederation of Cooperative Housing, and the project in the Wales Cooperative Centre is funded by the Nationwide and Welsh Government at the bottom of the slides there. So today I'm going to give a toolkit overview of Wayshaper, how it works, and then questions and answers. But as I say, if you've got a question, in that there's only half a dozen of us, please indicate, wave, put a hand up formally or whatever, or just unmute yourself and shout at me. It's like an interactive meeting. We get used to that, don't we? So the proposition is that Wayshaper is a decision-making tool for community-led housing groups. It's self-facilitated, i.e. groups can do it themselves, or supported by accredited advisors. And both myself, Casey and Alan are accredited advisors and have gone through the same training as Prana will have gone with Blaze over the last couple of years. And we work with groups in Wales and down in Devon for Brana, going through giving people the options and choices of how they can look at the multitude of options that there are for community-led housing. It aims to simplify and support, accelerate the development of a group model, and thereby accelerate the delivery of overall stock. It's about getting things going. Community-led housing can take 5-7 years, but we want to ease this process and speed it up. And I'll just admit Maggie to the group.
She should be admitted, Dave.
Yeah. So what is Wayshaper? It's a complete toolkit with workshop instructions, which fold out to an A3 size, 16 priority workshop cards with choices on them, and then those choices are represented with 70 option cards. And on those option cards is a QR code which gives you the information and link to the website with all the information on there. But we'll go through in a bit more detail. I won't say it's like Cooperly because that's a different ball game, but it is like telling your future with cards, trying to predict it and have some control. So any questions on that simple bit? And how it came about, us enablers or advisors wanted a resource library that was up to date and consistent across England, Wales and Scotland. There was a tendency for groups to just follow another model and then try and tweak it rather than going back to basics and looking at all the options. And then there are incompatibilities with group options. If you choose one thing, like you want a closed or a member ownership co-op, you can't have community shares if you want that funding route. So certain choices prevent you from doing other things. So how it works, and Alan will, his screen is pinned if you want to have a look at it. The 4 pillars, exploration. So look at all 16 options that are distilled down onto the 16 cards. There's an information library which you can access either online when you have a subscription, or we can access it for you as accredited advisors. and there's a range of documents there which are kept up to date by CCH on all the different legal models and the grants available, the types of legal structures. And it is very participative. It's to encourage group decision in both a physical and virtual way. So this is a hybrid meeting, and we have done meetings with Alan in a barn in mid Wales when we're looking in. He's holding his phone over the cards, and we can see what the group are doing. It's not ideal because you can't always get all the people together in the same room or same place. Although there'll be people in a group, even if you have a physical meeting, they can't actually get there because of family commitments or they're away on holiday, but yet they want to participate. So this enables people to participate wherever they are. And it's holistic planning. It tackles incompatible options. It indicates which ones you can't do if you've chosen a certain model, and then you can review it and maybe change your priorities to enable something else to do, so you realize the consequences of the decisions that you've made. This is a two-stage process. The first one is group priorities workshop, where you look at all 16 cards, and then a group options workshop, which you go through the priorities that you've had to look through. So you look at the 16, and then you look at the individuals from the 16 in priority groups and compare with the 70 options. But I'll go through that in a little bit more detail. But it's to promote discussion. A lot of people are visual learners, others look at spreadsheets and pictures or write in text. This is a mixture of all ways of learning, so it encourages engagement. Does that make sense to people? Is that okay? So the group priorities workshop, which we here at the Wales Cooperative Centre and Prana in Devon can help a group go through the options, and they will have met the group beforehand and understood what the group are looking at. They have a vision and values and an aim. And as I said, there's a fold out A3 sheet showing the process. And apologies for the small print on here, but it is on the website, their website, and you can follow the stages through. And it has been trialed with groups, with accredited advisors, which helped in the preparation of it. So it was sort of live tested before published. So the 16 priority cards are listed there, and they're all color coded on the front and the back, so you can see which ones you're looking at. The finance one, which we look at, a purple, and it relates to various stages of the development of a community-led scheme. The planning one is the planning of the co-op, not the legal planning process for the local authority. It's if you want to work in partnership with a housing association. So it relates to the setup of the community-led housing organisation. So this is an example of a finance one, which does the group have a preferred way of funding the project? If you can't read it on there, and Alan picking it up, it's about debt, grants, soft loans, equity. There's 7 different options there. So what the group will do and could have done before the advisor gets to them in some ways, or they can do it there together, is set A is the things you've already decided on. You may have decided that you want to get community shares as part of your funding. You may want to have homes only for members of the group, a fully mutual co-op, and other criteria that you've looked at. So there may be a handful in there. And then the next things are things that are important to the group's vision that you want to make a decision on in this session and the ones coming up. And then the remaining ones, which are maybe less priority and you can look at later, or they may be eliminated or changed as you go through the process. I think it's just a graphic thing that there aren't 16 cards put up there. But, that's, there's only 15, I think, unless my maths is wrong. But you'd look at all 16 cards. So then when you've got them into the groups, you then prioritize them within that group of 4. And in this particular scenario, finance has come to be the priority one. It may be different things, like the location, the design of it, the legal structure, what you're interested in is the priority, but this particular example follows the finance cards. We just chose one to go through. So you prioritize those, then the ones you wanted to look at in more detail, and then the remaining cards in some sort. So you break it down into decision making. It's a bit like Pointless. Those who watch Pointless at the end of the day with something to do, just know that work is finished, where you prioritize the 3 pointless answers, which one's least likely to fail, or which one's going to win. But it's just to break it down so you've got some sort of structure to look at it and the way you tackle it. So when you've done those options, those priorities, you then go into the options workshop where you look at these particular cards. So these are 70 cards and you lay them out face up on a table if you can. And you will note that the purple ones, the finance ones, are on the middle of the second row, but there are different choices. There's 3 choices for residents. Whether you're looking for specific homes for the group, or the ethos of the group is the next module. So that those are set out like you would pairs or Pelmanism with a pack of cards. And then you look at your first priority card from the first set of 4, which in this case was finance. So it's quite easy to see color code which ones there are. And then you have a choice within those finance cards of grants and soft loans, equity, community shares, cross subsidies through mixed development, sales and rent levels and ratios, free or discounted land, because that is a form of finance. It's financing kind. Lucky if you can get free land. Discounted land is a rarity unless you're looking at social value. Does that make sense to people? So I just ran through the choices of the cards. You can read them again there, and on each one there says what the thing is: fundraising activities that organizations undertake from private sources, is for community shares or loan stock issues. And then some questions on that. What is the membership and legal form? Are you a KIC? It would be difficult to be a fully mutual co-op and do community shares. The repayment terms. Alan's helped a project which had loan, which had loan stock, and the 5-year period, 10-year period, 3-year period, whatever. Interest rates, different interest rates for different periods, and creating an offer document. And we provided help there and a business plan with Andy Woodcock. And then at the bottom in the red, it says incompatible options. It gives you a list of things. If you choose community shares, you can't do other things. They preclude or exclude other things. And there's a QR code at the bottom which you can scan, and then you can get on your mobile phone the various documents related to that particular card. So this is another card. You review it. Cross subsidies through mixed development, where you may be selling properties. It would be difficult if it's a CLT and you want to retain the freehold, might want to sell on a long lease. And as I said previously, the green bullet points for different legal models. The QR will guide you to those. Amber bullet points for you to discussion, for you to consider. The occupancy agreement. Here in Wales, we can use assured tenancies because of the Housing Wales Act 2014. It could be contractual tenancies in some organisations in England and Scotland. And it then describes the incompatible cards, list the incompatible cards that you can't do if you're doing this particular route, and again a link to the website. So from this illustration, in finance, you're looking at cross subsidy. You will look at the information and links to the website about it. And then choose that card and turn over the other 5 in the group, because you've chosen to do community shares and loan stock. Sorry, you've chosen to do cross subsidy through mixed use development. That's your model. So that then precludes the last 3 in the red box before finance, which is ownership. A couple of types of ownership you can't have if you're doing cross subsidy, and then a couple further down. So you're starting to eliminate things at the other options in less priority groups. So then you look at the next one, the green one, which is for residents, which in this case is the second priority, and you'll do a similar process, deleting cards that you can't, options that you can't use. And you repeat.
Sorry, could I ask a question of you?
Yeah.
My question is, when you're looking at those finance options and you picked cross subsidy for this one, I take it they're not mutually exclusive, in that you could have a mix of cross subsidy and commercial loans.
Yes, I suppose you could choose two cards.
I jump in there as well. I was going to say that I recently did a Wayshaper with a group, and that's one of the slight flaws that I think I found with these cards, is that especially with that finance option, usually it's a sort of mixed finance model, isn't it? You don't typically have complete grant funding or complete private finance. So yeah, I think that was one of the biggest flaws that I found, was that it was difficult to think, oh well, are we just going to have one finance card sort of turned upright and turn the rest over, because then that will sort of influence then the rest of the turning over of the cards. But I think what I did with my group is said, okay, where do you expect your main source of finance to come? And then thinking then, so we can sort of focus on one type of finance, which then doesn't sort of mess up the rest of the cards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's very helpful, Casey. And community-led housing is bespoke. There are probably as many different types of community-led housing as there are numbers of community-led housing groups. Some of them will have a shared model, but to limit it to 16 types is what is manageable. Those, as Casey said, were the main options. It could be a blend of things, or do you on a site where you've got two different types. You may have two community land trust owning it all, and then two different legal models handling part of that site with different funding sources for each bit. If you can't get the legal structure for one thing you want to do because it prevents something else, but ideally you want something general and something simple that can be a mixture, a blend of cross subsidy. We, with our advisors, can help you look at that. And Casey's already indicated that that's what we can do. There are obviously limitations of a model. There'll be 500 different cards and you'd never get through it all. So thanks for that question and answer. Anything else from anybody? We'll move on.
On this card, the incompatible options are down the bottom, and they're mostly not related to finance. So, I can't lay all the cards out, but they would be in other areas. As that slide shows, there's some orange ones and a couple of blue ones. But yeah, I guess you could still have two of the purple cards open, and then you'd have to get rid of two sets of incompatible options.
Yeah, I mean the two end ones there on that one. I think it says mixed tenure.
I think certainly when you're talking about a group that's very, very new and they don't have land yet, they don't have a site, then really you're going to have more open cards than closed card, as it's as circumstances arise, you can play out different scenarios.
Yes.
And then that will help decision making as well, is to sort of game each option depending on site and what happens with the participants, and does the mission shift at all, that sort of thing. Yeah,
I think you're right. Once you've done this once, you may then go back and reprioritize what you're doing. I'm not saying you'll change your overall vision and aim.
Yeah.
But you need to have some sort of idea to start, and you can repeat it at various stages within the process. And when you've got a particular site, does it still meet your options?
right.
And when it says later on now, recording where you are, with Alan's got them out on you put them out on a table. You could just take a photo at each stage of this is where you are on your mobile phone, rather than writing down which ones you've turned over, or you just write down we've chosen that one. But as Casey said, you might have two which you're looking at, and you can go back and vary. It's an interactive, reiterative tool. It's not hard and fast. Like when you've actually signed up for a particular legal model, you can't change it unless you change the rules or do secondary rules or go back to Corps UK to get it to change. This is relatively easy to change, just turning a card and over. It's rather like you know, the design process, we talked about the RIBA stages. It's easy to change, or easier to change things on a drawing and a plan and a specification as you go through than when you're actually building the thing. If you want to put a window in and a wall which is full of concrete, it's a lot more expensive than just leaving a gap. This enables you to shape your community-led housing project. In a way, I'm using Wayshaper there, that you then, when you get the legal incorporation, it's right and fit. We always say that form follows function, and you should, you know, not necessarily leave the legal incorporation till the very end until you know what you're doing. So you might want to set up as an organization to be able to offer and bid for land, but this enables you to make that choice early on, which fits what you're going to actually build on site when you come to it. So it's like, you know, it's a design process for the community-led organization. You know, it's like, you know, doing drawings and sketches if you're actually doing the physical buildings. And it's not perfect, nothing is, and this is the first formal iteration of it. Although we did trial it, we're hoping to do a Welsh version and translate into Welsh. And I know CCH are trying to do an international model, and feedback from ourselves and residents and people like yourselves trialing it and use it will change the next version. So it quite clearly says it's, you know, it's version 1, and we will identify improvements as we go forward. So thanks for those comments. So this is just an illustrative thing, and the purple ones you still see that is still on that 5th option. The 2 red ones above are turned over, and another red one. And as you go through it, you're eliminating things in line with your priorities, from set A first, then set B, and then set C. I mean, in terms of timing, you might want to do 2 or 3 workshops. I don't know what you think, Alan, how far you got with yours in the barn. We've just got to the first stage, but you could, you know, pause, take a photo, set them out. Well, this is where we were before. We've got the rest to do, and do it that way.
Yeah, we did the priorities workshop first, which are these ones, the 16, and then, as you say, ordered them in the groups that you described, took photographs of the different groupings, and then the plan was to, or is to, go back and do the bigger workshop. One of the group has had a baby in between, so there's been a bit of a delay on going back and doing that second workshop, but that will happen as winter draws in, and we probably need more time for the second one. I know Casey's done, I think you've done the second one, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I was just thinking about timings then. I think our first sort of priority workshop took about an hour, and then our second sort of the options workshop took about an hour and a half, although they are quite a small group, so it was quite a small number of people in the room, so they were quite efficient at making decisions, and they've got quite a clear vision. But I think if you've got a larger group and sort of bigger amount of people in the room with you, it might take a bit longer, and if people can be a bit indecisive, I think it's really important to have a clear vision and also a clear method of making decisions, because you could just end up going round and round in circles at these sessions. So yeah, for me, I was lucky enough to have quite a small group and who had a really clear method of making decisions, so that it worked well.
I had about 10 in my group, and there was 10 round a table in the barn, and then there was another person part of the group who was on Zoom traveling to Bristol on a coach.
Yeah.
But we did it. It was just like making sure that that person was included in every sort of level of the conversation, and just as a facilitator going back and saying, and how do you feel about this, when, you know, whether something was important or not. But it did work. It's just, I think it is really helpful to have a facilitator there, one of we advisors to be there for a group, because there's loads of questions that come up during the process, and rather than having to scan the code and go to the website, if an advisor is there with working with the group, they can more or less answer most questions, I think, as they come up. I was really fortunate as well to have 4 of my colleagues on the Zoom call as well, who could also come in and answer questions that I couldn't. But that was a kind of like experiment to see how it worked. It was good.
Yeah, I think, you know, as I said in the very beginning, it's a hybrid way of doing it. It's virtual and physical. And yes, Casey and I and others could Zoom in with Alan. Although Alan was leading it, we could impart some of our knowledge as well, because it is a team support here, and no one person has all the answers, or it is difficult to think of something when you're trying to do something else. You may know the answer, but you're trying to do something else, whereas somebody else can, you know, take a breath and think about it and answer it for you. You're physically doing and shuffling the cards and whatever and moving it there, and it's just about having an additional resource in the room with the group, and rather than 2 advisors drive to meet a group, one can meet them physically and the other one can just come in. Similarly with groups, if they're away, holiday commitments, they don't have to be excluded from the meeting. It can be virtual for them through a mobile phone. They can hear the conversation. Look, they can visually see the cards on the table, and then when they come to do the second stage or next version, do, you know, set B and set C, they know the process from the first session and set A, so it's familiar to them. Or if they have to go away for the second meeting, so in terms of timing, probably you'd be looking to do your priorities and maybe do one lot of options, and then maybe you have a break in them with that, or then come back another meeting, you review your options, you review your priorities, and then do set B and set C. So maybe 2 or 3 meetings, unless you've got a very small, compact, and decision making group. And I'm sure Casey would ensure that it wasn't just one person within the group making the decisions. It's a collective decision. They all get an equal chance to put their views in. And I'd say the enabler, facilitator, can encourage contributions from people. What about that card? What about that one? It's a visual thing. Just pointing.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yes, yeah, pleasure.
When making decisions, is it a process of getting complete consensus, or is it majority rules, or is it dependent on the group and how they're organized? Because mine is quite keen on sociocracy and that form of decision making, where consent is arrived at kind of by default, as in if nobody objects, it's consent.
Yeah, it would be dependent on the group.
Do you find it's fairly easy to gain consent and a yes or a no, or do you know yet?
I don't know. I mean, Casey said that, you know, the group did make decisions.
Sorry.
Go on, Casey.
No, I was just going to say my group also use sociocracy principles to make decisions, and they arrived at decisions quite easily. So like you said, if nobody strongly objected to a certain decision, then they would go with it. But I did make sure, so I had met this group a couple of times before I did this session with them, and they hadn't actually decided on the method that they were going to use to make decisions. So before this workshop, I sort of sent them a couple of resources and sort of asked them and instructed them to take some time to think about how they would make decisions before this session, so that it could be an easier process. So they did that before the session, and it just made things a lot easier. Like I did say, it was a very small group, so coming to decisions was quite easy. So obviously that made the process a lot easier in itself. But if you're a larger group, then obviously some people will perhaps object more to certain decisions. But yeah, like Dave said, it totally depends on what method the group have chosen to make those decisions.
Yeah, I think it's a toolkit, and it indicates the way you're going to make the decisions and what you're going to do. I would suggest that the board or the members, then formally agree, if they're going to use a certain legal model, they would minute that in a meeting. They would record what you've done in the workshop, but then it would be formally agreed, and that's what you're going to go forward, and that would be the basis of where you register, incorporate, and sign a document. This is a decision-making tool. It's not the legally binding document. Oh, well, you put that card there, therefore you, and turn that one over, you've got to do it. It's not quite like that. So you would use your democratic processes in whatever decision-making structure you've got to confirm the outcome of the various iterations of this toolkit, and review it if you've got a different site or you've got a change. But it enables you to get an indication of where you're going to go and likely decisions before you formally agree them, and whether the group then uses a majority, unanimous, supermajority, or whatever decision-making process that they have. Or in some larger groups, it could be delegated to a committee or task and finish group to go ahead and look at this and then report back. So it depends on the size of the organization or group that you are they're helping, and the various partners within that group. So
Thank you. Thank you.
I think also, just to add, I think if there's a contentious card, it could be set aside and noted, and it doesn't necessarily need to stop the whole workshop, but worth hearing everybody's views, and then as an advisor and as a group, making a mental note of what those views were and why there was problems with coming to a decision on that. What I found in my group was that pretty much universal agreement on some things, and then there were some that were a bit foggier, a bit less clear about what decision people had actually come to. So yeah, it's just noting that and then coming back to that in the next meeting, which I think is, in that sense, I think it's good to have these workshops quite close together, because obviously the memory fades after a while. You might find yourself having to do the whole priorities again. Yeah,
and you could have, two options. You're not sure which one you're going to go on, and then as Alan said, you could park that. You then move on to your next priority. You work through that priority, and then that looks at the options again, and it may limit one of the options that you were looking at. It's eliminated. Well, if you choose this option on this other priority, you can't then have the other one, and that decision is made up for you. If you can't decide either way, it doesn't really matter. It may be precluded by the next step, maybe excluded by the next step. The choice is made for you. Back, it comes back in, and and as I say, they're only cards on the table. It's indicative, and you can make the decisions and change relatively simply. So it says there, make adjustments to the model and change to changing conditions. So we're nearly coming to the end now, and there is the end. So we've had a good set of questions there. I'll leave the presentation up just for a minute. If there's anything that people want me to go back to and have a look at, and explain that particular slide. I mean, here in Wales, we are accredited advisors. We've paid for the cards, and we can pay for the cards for each group. They could get a discount of, get their £300 if you want to buy as a group, and discount it to £50 if you get a voucher from your accredited advisors. I don't know what Prana is doing in Devon, but if the group's got the wherewithal and you could get 5 people, they all put £10 in, but it's on somebody else's credit card to pay for the card. It's a bit of a thing. You may not have set up a group with a bank account and a credit. You certainly won't have a corporate debit card or credit card. And how do you pay for it? So we can offer this service, turnkey with an advisor, other people coming into the group, or groups from in England and through the CCH can have their own group and go their own way. But I think the way that Prana is trying to do it and supporting the group is the way that we are looking at, and CCH would encourage people to do. And that subscription lasts for a year. You then have access with the QR codes to look at information and remodel for a year. And I'm not saying that you use that long to try and decide what you're doing. It needs to be quicker than that. But we have that access, and we'll renew our subscription next year and the year after, so we can go back and revisit. Whereas an emerging community-led housing group may want to do it 2-3 times over a few months, and then they move on to the next thing. They probably wouldn't renew for the second or third year unless they were doing another scheme.
Yeah, it's the same in Devon, and they get to keep that deck forever, so.
And you're right, Prana, they keep the pack, they don't have to send it back, but the QR codes won't work. But they could have downloaded and printed all the information, but that'd be an awful lot of information. So yeah, that's good. So are there any questions from Scotland?
Dave, thanks. No, it looks like it's a really well-defined toolkit that gives communities the steps that they need to follow to make their development a reality, which is fantastic. I think it's ideal. What I would say though is to communities, don't necessarily go in isolation. Reach out to similar groups, reach out to the Welsh Co-op. Don't go alone in your silo. The toolkit's fantastic, but there's a wealth of information out there and advice out there. So do reach out to others.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, and there are slight differences between the countries. I say we can use assured tenancies, and from one of the workshops yesterday in Scotland, you've got laws and community asset, right to buy community assets and whatever, and the toolkit can be tweaked for the Scottish options and the Welsh options, or maybe just a couple of sheets to say, well, the legislation in Scotland is slightly different to this particular model, the Welsh legislation, but we are hoping to get it translated into Welsh, because as I say, CCH, we do it in Gaelic, but CCH will be doing it maybe in France or other places across the world, because the principles are the same. So anything else from Devon, Sarah and Prana?
No, thank you. That was very comprehensive. And it's good, it's always good to go through that again. Do you know, is this slide deck, was this specially made bespoke for this session, or is this part of the slide deck that went out with the introduction to?
This is part of the slides that Blaze sent out with the introduction and launch. I've taken out some and tweaked it a bit to make it a bit more interactive and topped and tailed it. I asked Blaze if I could do that. You as a delegate, as a member of this workshop demo, will get a copy of it anyway.
Oh, I'll get a copy of the slide deck.
I think so, Casey, isn't it?
I don't know. That would be wonderful.
What I'll do, Prana, is I'll ask Blaze. He knows I'm doing it, and I will say, can I send? Because I split this PDF into a PowerPoint and then took bits out